Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Minoan Snake Goddess, what her cult tells us about power before patriarchy. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1903, Arthur Evans excavated the Palace of Knossos on Crete and pulled from the rubble something that stopped his team cold. Faience figurines of a woman holding snakes in both raised hands, bare-breasted, dominant, unmistakably divine. He called her the Snake Goddess. She was worshipped by the most sophisticated civilization in Bronze Age Europe, a culture that installed flush toilets in 2000 BC, that decorated its palaces with images of athletic women leaping over charging bulls, and whose art showed no kings, no wars, and no defeated enemies. The Minoans flourished for 1500 years on Crete, before vanishing around 1450 BC in a collapse that archaeology has never fully explained. They left behind extraordinary buildings, breathtaking frescoes, and a written script, linear A, that remains undeciphered today. We cannot read a single Minoan text. We do not know what they called themselves, what their rulers were named, or what they believed. We only have the images, and those images show women at the center of everything. Who were the Minoans, and what did they know that the civilizations that replaced them had forgotten? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. For as long as human beings have told stories, they have told stories about what was lost. Every great culture on Earth carries myths of a golden age, a time before the current order, when civilization stood taller, knew more, and reached further than anything that came after. For centuries, scholars categorized these stories as allegory, comforting fictions invented by cultures to explain the gap between their aspirations and their achievements. But a quiet revolution in archaeology, geology, and oceanography has changed that calculus. The evidence now accumulating from seafloors, ice cores, and ancient texts is demanding a fundamental revision of the human story, one in which the line between myth and memory is far thinner than we imagined. The conventional timeline of civilization holds that complex urban society first emerged in Mesopotamia around 3500 BC. Before that, scattered farming villages, nomadic hunter-gatherers, and nothing more. But this tidy narrative has been challenged repeatedly by anomalous discoveries that do not fit the accepted sequence. Megalithic structures dated to 10,000 BC or earlier. Astronomical alignments encoded in monuments by cultures supposedly too primitive to understand the sky. Mathematical ratios embedded in architecture that would not be formally derived for thousands of years. These discoveries are not fringe fabrications. They are measured, published, and debated in peer-reviewed literature. They point toward a past far more complex than the textbooks describe. What happens when a civilization falls? Most of its knowledge disappears. The libraries burn, the engineers die, the farmers abandon the fields. Within a generation or two, the grandchildren of architects are living in the ruins of buildings they cannot build. We know this happened in the Bronze Age collapse of 1200 BC, when a networked civilization spanning the Mediterranean was destroyed in a matter of decades. We know it from the fall of Rome. History is not a steady march of progress. It is punctuated by catastrophic resets, after which humanity must begin again. The question is whether some of those resets happened far earlier than we know, and whether their traces are still waiting to be found beneath our feet. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades, and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding the Minoan Snake Goddess. What her cult tells us about power before patriarchy is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Minoan civilization flourished on the island of Crete from approximately 3000 BC to 1450 BC, representing the earliest advanced civilization in Europe. At its height, the Palace of Knossos covered 22,000 square meters across multiple stories, with sophisticated drainage systems, flush toilets, and fresco-covered walls depicting nature, ritual, and athletics, among the finest art produced anywhere in the ancient world. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly, it is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the snake goddess figurines discovered by Evans at Knossos are dated to approximately 1600 BC and were crafted from faience, a glazed quartz composite requiring advanced kiln technology. Two principal figurines survive, one held in the Heraclean Archaeological Museum on Crete, and one in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Both show a female figure holding snakes aloft in a posture of command, with elaborate dress indicating high ceremonial status. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine Minoan frescoes from Knossos, Crete, and other sites consistently show women in prominent ceremonial and athletic roles. The famous bull-leaping fresco depicts both male and female athletes vaulting over bulls, with female figures distinguished by white skin following Egyptian artistic convention. No Minoan fresco from the pre-collapse period shows a king, a military commander, or a scene of conquest. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the Minoan civilization possessed at least two writing systems, an undeciphered hieroglyphic script and linear A, which also remains undeciphered despite decades of study. This means we have no access to Minoan religious texts, legal codes, king lists, or personal records. Everything we know about Minoan society comes exclusively from physical remains, architecture, art, and artifacts, without the corrective or confirmatory evidence of written language. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the Minoan civilization collapsed around 1450 BC. The cause remains debated. The Thura volcanic eruption, now dated to approximately 1620 BC, disrupted the Aegean, but predates the collapse by over a century. Mycenaean Greek Linear B tablets appear at Knossos after 1450 BC, indicating Greek-speaking rulers had taken control of the palace, suggesting conquest or elite replacement rather than pure environmental catastrophe. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. DNA analysis, published in 2013, confirmed that Minoans were genetically European, closely related to Neolithic Anatolian populations who had settled the Aegean thousands of years earlier. This resolved earlier speculation about Egyptian or North African origins and established Minoans as a branch of the same population that spread farming across Europe, making their cultural distinctiveness all the more remarkable within its European context. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Minoan Snake Goddess, what her cult tells us about power before patriarchy. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Minoan society was matriarchal, with women holding primary religious and political authority, a view championed by Arthur Evans and developed by later feminist archaeologists. The snake goddess, female-dominated frescoes, and absence of male warrior iconography are cited as evidence. Critics argue that prominence of female figures in ritual art does not confirm female political authority, and that Evans projected Victorian fascination with a golden age of feminine rule onto ambiguous material evidence. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that Minoan society was an egalitarian culture in which women held prominent religious roles without necessarily dominating political structures, the current mainstream archaeological position. This interpretation accepts the genuine visibility of women in Minoan art while resisting the conclusion of matriarchy, noting that evidence shows equality and female religious authority rather than female dominance, and that political structures remain unknown given the undeciphered state of linear A. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the snake goddess represents an earth or chthonic fertility deity common across the Bronze Age Mediterranean, and her prominent iconography reflects religious tradition rather than the political status of actual Minoan women. Parallels exist in Anatolian, Levantine, and Aegean goddess traditions, and the figurines may indicate Minoan participation in a widespread Bronze Age religious network rather than a uniquely female-centered social structure. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Minoan Snake Goddess, what her cult tells us about power before patriarchy, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the consistent representation of women presiding over rituals in Minoan frescoes, including the grandstand fresco from Knossos showing a female figure at the center of a large public gathering, provides the strongest visual case for significant female religious authority. No comparable Minoan image shows a male figure in an equivalent ceremonial central role in the pre-collapse artistic record. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the undeciphered state of linear is the critical evidential gap in all Minoan social reconstruction. Linear B tablets found at Knossos after 1450 BC, written in Mycenaean Greek and successfully deciphered by Michael Ventris in 1952, record male-named rulers and administrators. Whether pre-conquest Minoan texts would show the same pattern cannot be determined until linear is read. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed parallel evidence from Saddle Höyük in central Anatolia, dated 7500–5700 BC, shows similar prominence of female figurines in a settlement with no evidence of hierarchical male dominance, suggesting that female-centered or egalitarian ritual systems were present in early agricultural Anatolian cultures ancestral to the Minoan population, lending contextual plausibility to the egalitarian interpretation of Minoan gender roles. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Minoan Snake Goddess, what her cult tells us about power before patriarchy. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Linear remains undeciphered, despite the Linear B breakthrough in 1952 and decades of subsequent cryptographic and comparative linguistic effort. Excavations at Knossos continue under the British School at Athens, and the exceptionally preserved Minoan settlement at Crete on Thera, buried by volcanic ash like a Bronze Age Pompeii, continues to yield new material. Feminist archaeology has substantially revised Evans' interpretations, replacing matriarchy with egalitarianism as the preferred model while preserving the central finding that women held prominent ritual authority. The Minoan Snake Goddess remains the most powerful surviving image of female religious authority in Bronze Age Europe, and the question of what Minoan society actually was, unreadable in its own words, remains genuinely open. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Minoan Snake Goddess, what her cult tells us about power before patriarchy, from the historical record, through physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Minoan civilization ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.